I spent years sending my parents $2,500 a month, thinking I was just being a good daughter. It started with a leaking roof, but turned into endless emergencies, while they vacationed and upgraded TVs. When I gently asked them to cut back, they accused me of being ungrateful. Even when I ended up in the hospital, unable to work, they said they had planned expenses and couldn't help. That was my breaking point. I confronted them with facts, with numbers, with the truth. I was drowning while they lived comfortably off my efforts. I set hard boundaries and they pushed back. Guilt, silence, blame. But slowly things changed. They found part-time jobs, started budgeting, and even sent me money when I was struggling. For the first time, our relationship felt real, based on care, not control. And I finally felt like their daughter again, not their bank. Stay with me if you want to hear how this story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. I want to share a story I've never told publicly before. It's about how my parents gradually turned me into their personal ATM, and how I eventually found the strength to change this situation. I've hesitated for a long time about whether to share this experience. It's painful, embarrassing, and part of me still feels guilty for speaking about it out loud. But I know many people find themselves in similar situations with relatives, and perhaps my story will help someone see their own situation in a different light. I grew up in what most people would call an ordinary middle-class family. My parents worked, Dad at a manufacturing plant, Mom in accounting at a local company. We didn't have luxury, but we weren't struggling either. Food was always on the table, we had seasonal clothes, and even annual vacations, though modest ones. I was an only child, and my parents often said that everything they did was for my future. The best investment is education, my dad loved to repeat. Mom would nod in agreement. We want you to achieve more than we could, so I studied hard. I got good grades, participated in academic competitions, took extra English classes. Everything was going according to plan. I got into a prestigious university in the city, majoring in economics, and received a scholarship that covered part of the tuition. My parents paid for the rest, having saved for years. It's our duty, they would say. When we're old, you'll take care of us. That's fair. I nodded, not really thinking about these words. Of course I would help my parents in their old age. Isn't that what all children do? In my junior year of university, I started working part-time as an assistant at a marketing agency. The small salary allowed me to stop asking my parents for pocket money. I was even saving a bit each month. I wanted to travel Europe for a month after graduation, before diving into real adult life with a full-time job. One evening, during our weekly video call, my parents looked worried. We have problems with the roof, Dad explained. After the last rainstorm, there's a leak. We need urgent repairs, and we don't have spare funds right now. All our savings went to your education. My heart tightened with guilt. How much do you need? I asked. The amount turned out to be exactly what I had saved over the last 6 months. All my travel savings. But how could I refuse? This was the roof over my parents' heads. I'll transfer the money tomorrow, I said, trying not to show my disappointment. You're our smart girl, Mom smiled. We knew we could count on you. After graduating from university, I got a good job at a consulting firm. The salary was solid, especially for a recent graduate, $75,000 a year. I rented a small studio apartment in a residential area and finally felt independent. Now I could not only cover my needs but also start saving again. For my own place, for that postponed trip, for the future. But calls from my parents asking for financial help started coming more frequently. At first, these were emergencies. Dad's car broke down, and he needed $3,000 for repairs. Then Mom urgently needed dental work costing $4,500. Then it turned out they were struggling to pay utilities, which had sharply increased. I helped every time, initially not noticing that such emergencies started appearing monthly, and the amounts gradually increased. Meanwhile, I noticed photos on social media of my parents on a beach vacation they hadn't even mentioned to me. And during a video call, I saw a huge new TV in their living room. "Oh, that?" Mom casually said. "The neighbors were moving and selling it for next to nothing. We couldn't turn down such an offer." I felt something inside me twitch, but I kept quiet. When I started carefully hinting that I couldn't help them monthly with such large sums because I had my own expenses and plans, the reaction was sharp and painful. "We dedicated our whole lives to you," Dad said with a note of indignation. "We denied ourselves everything so you could get an education and a good job. And now, when we need help, you're counting every penny." "You know our pensions are tiny," Mom chimed in. "We're not asking for anything extraordinary, just helping your parents make ends meet." Each such conversation left me feeling like I'd been covered with something dirty and sticky. Feelings of guilt, shame, and duty mixed with resentment and disappointment. I knew my parents really had sacrificed a lot for me, but something in their current behavior seemed wrong. I tried to be rational. "Let's look at your budget," I suggested. "Maybe we can find ways to cut expenses." They categorically refused. "You don't trust us? Think we don't know how to manage money?" Dad was outraged. "We lived independently when you weren't even born yet." Gradually, a system formed. At the beginning of each month, I would transfer a fixed amount to my parents, about $2,500, nearly a third of my salary. I told myself it was normal, that it was my duty. But my own financial situation began to deteriorate. I could no longer save for my own home. The dream of traveling was pushed back indefinitely. I started looking for weekend gigs to make ends meet. The stress led to health problems, insomnia, constant headaches, gastritis flare-ups. And worst of all, our conversations with my parents now revolved mainly around money. The warmth disappeared. The feeling of joy in communication vanished. Each call turned into tense anticipation. When would they start talking about their financial difficulties again? One day, Mom sent me a photo of a fur coat that was absolutely necessary for winter. The price of this coat equaled my monthly salary. "I can't pay for this," I said honestly. "But my birthday is coming up," she replied. "You always gave me money for a gift, and I was counting on it." I felt something break inside me. Had I become just a source of funding for my parents' whims? The moment of truth came when I got seriously ill. Severe pneumonia put me in the hospital for 2 weeks. Due to the illness, I couldn't work, and treatment required significant expenses, only partially covered by insurance. I called my parents and for the first time asked them for financial help. "I'm really struggling right now," I explained. "I won't be able to send you money this month, and I might even need help paying my medical bills." There was a long pause. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Well, we're not in the best shape either right now. We were counting on your help, already planned expenses. Doesn't your insurance cover the treatment?" Couldn't believe my ears. For 3 years, when I'd been giving them a third of my income, over $90,000 in total, they hadn't set anything aside for a rainy day? And now, when their daughter is in the hospital, they're thinking about their planned expenses? "What expenses?" I asked weakly. "Well, we were going to replace the furniture in the living room," Mom replied. "And Dad has his eye on new fishing gear. He needs it for his health, to calm his nerves in nature." That night, lying under an 4 drip, I cried like I hadn't since childhood. But these tears became my cleansing. I finally understood that I had become a victim of emotional blackmail and manipulation. That my parents' love had become conditional. They loved me as long as I financed their lifestyle. And worst of all, I had allowed this to happen. After being discharged from the hospital, I took a 2-week leave to recover and went to visit my parents. It was time for a serious face-to-face conversation. I prepared thoroughly. I compiled a table of all the amounts I had transferred to them over 3 years. It totaled over $90,000. Compared it with my income, analyzed their spending as much as I could track it. The numbers were shocking even to me. "We need to talk," I said, sitting down at the kitchen table. What's happening between us cannot continue. They exchanged anxious glances. What do you mean? Mom asked cautiously. I opened my table and started speaking. Calmly, without accusations, but firmly. I explained that over these years I had given them a sum that would have been enough for a down payment on an apartment. That I was working to the point of exhaustion, taking on extra projects. That my health was deteriorating due to constant stress. And most painfully, the feeling that our relationship was now built only around money. I love you and will always help in case of real need, I said. But I can no longer finance your whims. I have a right to my own life and future. The reaction was predictable. Denial, indignation, accusations of ingratitude. After everything we did for you, they repeated. Yes, you did a lot, I agreed. You were good parents, gave me education, support, and I'm infinitely grateful to you for that. But that doesn't mean I owe you for the rest of my life. Parenthood is not an investment with guaranteed returns. It's unconditional love and the desire for your child to be happy. The conversation was exhausting and painful for all of us. But it was necessary. I established clear financial boundaries. First, I would help my parents with a fixed amount each month, significantly less than before, but stable, $800 instead of $2,500. Second, for real emergencies, medical expenses, critical home repairs, I would always find additional funds. Third, but for non-essential items, new furniture, electronics, entertainment, clothes, they would have to save from their pension and part-time jobs. My parents didn't take it well. Dad walked around gloomy for several days and barely spoke to me. Mom tried to appeal to my feelings with stories about their difficult life. But I was firm. Emotional blackmail no longer worked. I understood that I was doing the right thing, not only for myself but for them too, because dependence on my money wasn't making them happier or healthier. The next few months were not easy. My parents constantly tested the boundaries I had set. Dad would accidentally mention a new jacket he couldn't afford. Mom would hint that they had to give up their planned vacation due to lack of funds. Several times I almost gave in. The feeling of guilt sometimes overwhelmed me. But I held firm, repeating to myself, this isn't selfishness. These are healthy relationships. I haven't abandoned them. I've just stopped being their ATM. I started visiting them more often, not with money, but with attention and care. I helped around the house, cooked their favorite dishes, just sat and talked. Real communication, not overshadowed by money talk. At first they resisted, trying to steer the conversation back to financial issues. But gradually something began to change. 6 months after our difficult conversation, I noticed strange changes. Dad found a part-time job as a consultant at a local company, using his 30 years of experience. Mom started selling her home baking to neighbors and acquaintances, which had always been her passion. When I came to visit, I saw a budget table on the refrigerator, written in Mom's neat handwriting. They had started keeping track of expenses and planning purchases. You know, you were right, Dad suddenly said at dinner. We really did become too dependent on your help. It was wrong of us. I barely held back tears. This was the closest to an apology I could expect from him. And we like feeling productive again, Mom added. Being just retirees waiting for a transfer from our daughter. It's kind of demeaning when you think about it. 2 years have passed since I established my financial boundaries. During this time, much has changed. I finally fulfilled my dream of traveling Europe, on more modest terms than I initially planned, but it was incredible. I saved up for a down payment on a small apartment. My health improved significantly, but most importantly, my relationship with my parents changed. We returned to genuine, warm communication. I still help them financially, but within reasonable limits that don't undermine my own well-being. And now it's truly help, not a mandatory daughter tax. My parents became more independent and active. They found new interests and sources of additional income. Even their relationship with each other improved. They started communicating more, planning things together, rather than just existing side by side, discussing how to spend daughter's money. Sometimes I think that my financial separation from my parents was the best thing I did for them. Giving them the opportunity to feel capable of meeting their needs again, to find new goals in life. This turned out to be more important than any money. Looking back, I understand that the problem wasn't really about money. The real issue was unhealthy emotional dynamics, manipulation, and the lack of clear personal boundaries. Money was just the tool, not the root cause. Here are the lessons I took from this experience. First, offering financial help to your family is absolutely normal, but it should always be voluntary and within your means. If your support is destroying your own life, then it's no longer help. It's self-sacrifice. Second, guilt is a terrible advisor. When you're being manipulated through guilt, your choices will almost always end up hurting you, and eventually they'll hurt the ones doing the manipulating too. Third, setting healthy boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of love. Clear boundaries make relationships stronger and more respectful for everyone involved. Fourth, real parental love is unconditional. If your relationship with your parents is based only on what you give or do for them, that's not love. It's a transaction. Fifth, talking about money with loved ones is one of the hardest conversations you'll ever have, but also one of the most important. Avoiding it only makes things worse over time. And most importantly, I realized that loving your parents and setting boundaries are not opposites. In fact, sometimes the deepest form of love is having the courage to say no and helping someone grow into a stronger, more independent version of themselves. A month ago, something happened that showed me how much everything had changed. I experienced unexpected financial difficulties. The company where I work was undergoing reorganization, and for several months we received only the base rate without bonuses. I didn't complain to my parents, didn't want to worry them, but somehow they sensed something was wrong. One day I received a transfer from them, a small amount, but for them it was significant money. "We know you're going through a tough time right now," Mom wrote in a message. "You can always count on us." I cried reading these words, not because of the money, but because I felt our relationship had finally become healthy and mutual. We support each other not out of obligation or manipulation, but out of love and care. I immediately went to visit them with a huge bouquet of flowers and their favorite sweets. We spent the evening talking and laughing like a real family, without tension, without subtext, without hidden motives. And I realized, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the best results. Sometimes you need to go through pain to achieve healing. And sometimes the best thing you can do for those you love is to stop doing what harms them, even if they think they need it. If you're in a similar situation right now, know that you're not alone. Know that you have the right to healthy relationships and your own life. And know that establishing boundaries, though painful at first, can lead to true, healthy love in your family. Thank you for listening to my story.